Okay, everybody, I have on Dr. Shivani Gupta, and she is a renowned leader in the health and wellness industry. She's here to share about Ayurveda with with a mix of the Western world. And I have so many questions because there's words in here that I don't know necessarily what they mean. So I'm excited for you to explain it to me. We're going to talk about some circadian rhythm. I know that in motherhood, it's like, what does that mean? What's a circadian rhythm right now in my life? And just some other health things. I really want to talk a little bit about the inflammation and gut dysbiosis because I'm passionate about those topics as well. And I know that we've touched on it a little bit in the podcast. So I'm really excited to have you on. And I'd love for you just to kind of start by letting us know a little bit more about yourself and what got you into this industry.
Sure. So I was born in Houston, Texas, to this Indian immigrant family. And I grew up living in these two worlds of we moved here, and when I got sick, we'd go to the corner drugstore. Back then it was called Eckerd's. And then when I was sick in India, because we'd go to India every year of my life to go visit our grandparents, my cousins, and my family. Whenever I went to India and got sick, I'd get like hinka pani and turmeric and spices and like weird concoctions that my grandma would make to fix us. And I always thought, like, what's right? Why are the worlds so different? I don't understand. How is it so dichotomous? And so as I grew up, I was always sick. I was one of those people who had no gut health, no immune system. I'd be air sick, car sick, seasick, everything. And by the time I got to college, I was just sick of it. I was like, why am I the weak link? I always am sick. I need to figure this thing out. And so I asked my parents, I was like, we are in India, the land of yoga and Ayurveda. Like, could we go look around and figure this thing out? Because Western medicine is not working for my system. The antibiotics have killed my gut. Like, I just don't think anything's working. And so when I went on my quest to study Ayurveda under all these gurus in India, I was like, "Oh, this stuff works." And I really went like with this journalist mindset of you need to prove to me that your stuff works. I'm not here just to believe in things blindly. And Ayurveda healed everything. I built a gut that worked. I built immune system that worked. And shortly after that, I had made the decision to get pregnant. And so I was in this journey of being an entrepreneur, trying to create social entrepreneurial things like Ayurvedic oils. And I had an organic cotton children's clothing company in that time period as well. And when I got ready to get pregnant, I was like, whoa, Ayurveda is the key. Like, we need to understand as a society that pregnancy is the one of the most important things we will do in this lifetime. We as women need to honor that time. And so I went on my journey to get my master's in Ayurvedic sciences purely so I could have the entire knowledge base to write a book on Ayurvedic pregnancy. And then my advisor was like, you should do a PhD. And my PhD topic was going to be on pregnancy with Ayurveda, but I couldn't figure out how to get it together to do clinical trials on women while pregnant because that's pretty impossible. And so I had to switch my topic and I ended up switching to turmeric. But pregnancy is that much of a passion of mine that we honor that time because as women, that's our investment in our body and our health over our longevity. And we can't take that lightly because that time period can be a huge trauma or a huge tax on the body if we aren't paying attention.
Yeah. Um, yes, it is. And I can't remember what guest of mine said that. She was saying that sometimes even in like postpartum recovery, like if you have underlying illnesses, for some women, something with like the hormone balance, it actually aids, like helps it, but in other women, it can trigger it. So if you have like underlying things going on, those can really be triggered in that season of life. And when you think about it, we are depleting ourselves completely. And
Yeah.
so if you don't have anything in your bank to pull from, you're depleted, and that can last years, right? Like that depletion, that whatever that toll on your health.
Yeah.
So it can definitely last years and take a while to come back from that. I've talked to several moms who have said like around the 8 year mark is like 7 to 9 years is when they start to feel like themselves again.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wild, right?
It is wild. And we think we should just bounce back and we should be Heidi Klum supermodel ready on the runway within 3 months. And these standards that we're creating are so unachievable and so ridiculous. And they really defy what is good for us. And
hmm
so I think bringing that consciousness back to honoring fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, and then even the cycles in motherhood as times when we need to continually honor oneself, practice self care, and all these pieces with an awareness of our own deficiencies so that we're constantly supporting our own foundation is the key. Because
Mhm.
otherwise we have the society of women who I see running around like crazy. I see most women aren't paying attention to fertility. In Ayurveda, we take that very seriously. That's like a 2-year prep part if you can if you can think about it in that way and plan for it in that way. If not 1 year, if not 6 months, but whatever you can do to prepare. Then it comes down to pregnancy and really honoring pregnancy as this beautiful time of like nourishment and self-nourishment and self-love and self-care and loving yourself because you're also loving that baby, all your emotions the baby feels, all the things you do, the baby feels. And then postpartum, we take postpartum really seriously in Ayurveda. There's a 40-day period of just healing for the mother. And so when I wrote that book, I wrote in there like the foods, the drinks, the reasoning is post baby, when you're breastfeeding, everything you do again is going to baby. Who's watching you? Who's managing you? Who's keeping your healthy fat, your vitamin D, your everything, your vitamin and mineral deficiencies on track so that you don't have long-term effects from that time period, like joint pain and different things from getting too cold or running around too much. We call it vata energy in Ayurveda. And then going into motherhood, I can honestly say, and we were talking about this before the podcast, I wish I had waited more because I was so gung ho, like, I'm going to get back to life and I'm going to work and I'm going to build my businesses. And it was almost like I was just spinning my wheels, like burning through fuel, spinning my wheels. I could have just had a more slow and steady mindset and then won peacefully anyways. Like it didn't have to be this depletion. Like my son was 2 when I launched my supplement company. That's insane. Like it was not productive in the first 2 years. It was just me tinkering. And so I wish I had just thought about that a little more. Now my kids are 10 and 13, and I'm like, yes. Like only in the last 2 years did I start the travel and the conferences and the marketing, but now the momentum is insane. So who knows what's right? But I think sometimes as women, we need to give ourselves more space in that
Mhm.
journey.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we don't really have a society here that honors that. So that's tough. Like
Yeah.
we're left without a village to help out and expecting those expectations from others and then like what we put on ourselves. And
Yeah.
um yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I feel that for sure. Before we dive into some more of that, when I was reading over like your profile and stuff, and as you mentioned, you have a PhD in turmeric.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, what does that even mean? You have to explain that to me.
Yeah, so I did my master's in Ayurvedic sciences. I looked for like an official program because I had studied Ayurveda on my own for so many years. I had gone to conferences and read books and done online courses, but I was like, if I'm going to write books to change the world, I better get a real degree in the topic, which we as women do, right? We need every degree to do the thing. So I did the master's and I was like, oh my God, like herbology really got me because I was learning everything. And Ayurveda is vast and complex. Like you could do that master's every day for the rest of your life and you would still learn profound things. But in herbology class, I was sitting there and they started going over the spices, cilantro, cumin, red chili powder, ginger. And each time they're naming all these benefits. And I was like, whoa, I'm an Indian woman. I have an Indian spice box in my kitchen. And we reach in there and we add all these spices every day. How lucky am I that I grew up using these spices and they have all those benefits? And when they got to turmeric, I was like, oh my God, this one spice does everything. Why are you guys not like making all of Western medicine shift how they approach inflammation? You're saying that this one thing will do it all? Because turmeric is anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, but it's also antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-aging. It's got properties of apoptosis. If you have things that are not serving you, it'll kill them off. When we're aging, it'll help kill off zombie cells. It can extend telomeres. It can help in the process of sirtuin. So when you get into the science, there's so much there. And I was like, okay, well, whoa, like, what if we could study this one spice further and then convince the entire system of medicine to change how they treat us? So that's why when my advisor was like, what other topic do you like outside of pregnancy? I was like, well, turmeric fascinates me because we're here buying all these superfoods. Like I'll try anything. So I try goji berries and hemp seeds and like I'll buy all of it. But if I'm paying all this money for all these solutions and turmeric will just do it, I'm a mom. Like I need efficient solutions that just get the job done. I don't have time for like 50 things all day and building complex, I don't know, smoothies
Mhm.
and shakes, trying to make everything taste good in there. So I did my PhD on turmeric, which means for years, all I did was sit there and study turmeric and all the science based on the subspecialty. So brain health, cardiac health. You can even discuss the big C, cancer, and all those things. All of them have a lot of science tied to curcumin because of its anti-inflammatory properties and because of how it interacts with the body. Like it connects to so many pathways, NF-kappa B, TNF alpha, interleukin 1, 3, 1, 6, 9, like there's so many COX and LOX, so many pathways it connects to. So it has so many opportunities to create shifts in the body. And once I did my PhD, then I became this crazy evangelist. And my husband's like, if you're going to tell everyone to take turmeric for everything, you should probably just make your own. And I was like, what kind of crazy idea is that? And I was sitting on my friend's couch. I lived in Jacksonville and had just moved here at the time. And I was like, I have this idea and I want to create this thing, but my kid is two. Like, I don't know what to do. She goes, well, if you're going to regret not doing it, I would do it when you have the momentum and the idea. But just know that your kid is two and you're gonna try to balance both and you're gonna try to do the best you can and you do it without regrets. And so that's the PhD. It was a big arduous thing, but I'm glad I did it because now I'm going to write books to change the world about inflammation and turmeric.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Um, I have like a super random story. I was in Bali and it was 2014. So 10 years, almost in February, 10 years ago. So like right around this time. And I did this like little detox thing there. And there was this lady who would come and give me massages. And I was just like backpacking by myself, just like really seeking some like healing in my life on multiple levels. And I swore this lady was a healer because I've never received a massage. Like I would go back to Bali just to get a massage from this lady. Like she knew my body. Like she was massaging me and she was like, oh, you were in an accident. And I was like, yeah, I was in a car accident when I was 18. And then she was massaging my stomach. She's like, you have digestive issues. Like, and she made me a thing and she's like, you need to drink this and you need to like learn how to make it. And it was turmeric and ginger and honey, I think. I don't remember all of it, but there was a lot of turmeric in there. And she was talking to me about that. So when you're saying that, it like made me think of this. And it's so cool that like you did have like your roots, like you had that. And I feel like so many other cultures do. And then there's people that didn't grow up like that. Like I didn't, like it was just you go get an antibiotic, you go to like whatever's over the counter. And then it's like my generation, like me and my siblings, like actually seeking the other stuff again, being like,
Right.
okay, like we want root cause
Yeah.
health. Like we don't want to mask. Like obviously these things are happening for a reason. Like my body's trying to speak to me and we're just numbing it or we're covering it. Not saying that there's not a place for antibiotics because there definitely is. But when I was a kid, it was like as soon as like you started tugging your ear, your doctor just prescribed your mom antibiotics to give you for an ear infection when like
Correct.
70% of ear infections aren't even viral or they're bacterial, they're viral. So it
Yeah.
doesn't even like make sense. So it's
Right.
like we're seeking these answers. So I'm like
Yeah.
super excited to talk to you because I love this kind of stuff. And I'm always like, I talk about gut health on here a lot, but I'm
Sure.
definitely not an expert.
Sure.
And I know that like my 3-year-old has some stuff and I've had a really hard time like finding answers because she ended up in the NICU her first year of life, or her first week of life. She was on
Yeah.
antibiotics and I know that she has underlying gut stuff.
Sure.
Um, she didn't have solid poops until she was like 3.
Wow.
So, and anybody that I talked to, it was like, didn't see a huge issue. So, right. So I'm like, okay, we need to find like a functional medicine doctor to work with. We need to like, I know she has some underlying stuff,
Sure.
but we don't have that knowledge. Like I
Right.
grew up that you just take them to the doctor and whatever they say goes.
Right. And we're learning so much about how that's not necessarily the way things should go. I took a class on hypnobirthing from my doula when I was pregnant with my first child. And in that hypnobirthing book, in the very beginning, it says standard of care has changed a lot over the decades. And that one statement just, I saw red. I was so enraged because it was like, yeah, so in the 50s and the 60s, the woman came to the hospital and we gassed her, we tied her down, and we took that baby out of her. And the men came back a few days later to pick her up. And I was like, That's barbaric. Like, talk about trauma, child trauma, what is happening? No, that was standard of care. So
Right.
by the time I was ready to give birth, I was like, love that you think standard of care is valid. So beautiful. Y'all will realize that your standard of care is absolute bullshit in about 50 years.
Mhm.
Cool. So I'm not listening. I'm not listening. I have sovereignty over my body. Yes, I'm signing up for the medical complex to be part of my journey for the safety of my child. I'm married to someone in the medical profession, so he wanted a hospital birth and all that. And in my first child's case, her lung collapsed spontaneously upon birth. So I'm grateful to the NICU and what they did. So I always like dance between my two worlds of yes, I when I'm stuck with you because I have to be, thank you for being awesome. But all the way up until the line where I have to actually listen to you, I actually have sovereignty over the journey. And so yes, it's such an interesting dichotomous place we live in where we have to be advocates, we have to be strong, because so much of what's being inflicted upon us by society, corporations, and the medical complex is just not good for us. And so much of the understandings are old. Like even in my own family, certain people say, oh, just give them antibiotics. I'm like, don't you realize my whole childhood I was given augmented month after month through high school? Every time I had a cold, the doctor was just like, here's your prescription, because that's what they believed to be good. It's not like they were trying to harm us. That was their belief at the time. We have a new understanding now. Like you said, it's not always bacterial, which means antibiotics will not always work. And so now when anyone sneezes, I'm like, take turmeric, take a probiotic, and take a D. It's called prevention. It's so basic. Don't you realize like you have control? And so that's what I'm trying to share with everyone is we have so much more control and ability to build foundational health than we understand. But we have to take that ownership. We have to take those steps. And we all are seeking those best tools to get there.
Right. Um, so I know you talk about just kind of like how turmeric helps with like low grade inflammation and gut dysbiosis. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that a little bit. I know that everyone listening is like, yeah, Liz, we know about your gut issues because I've talked about it a lot on here before. I had some stuff. I worked with a functional medicine doctor before I got pregnant with my first, and I'm
Sure.
seeing symptoms return
Sure.
recently. I think my pregnancy with her, like, and postpartum, like things that had bothered me before didn't. I felt great. I think it started coming back with my second.
Mm.
Um, and now I'm at the point where I need to start working with somebody again because I know I have issues. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about it. And I know I also have inflammation. I mean, when you were saying like your knee, your joints hurt this, my joints have hurt for as long as I could remember. Even
Sure.
as a kid, I remember running track and going to physical therapy for my knees when I was like 12.
Wow.
And they basically told me that I don't have cartilage between my patella and femur and that they just kind of grind.
Wow.
But I don't know if that's like real or not. So I'm like, I probably was just like malnourished in certain areas and didn't have proper like nutrient stores and like who knows, you know? So I feel like I've always had joint issues, but now that I'm getting older, like obviously you feel it more and I'm having more knowledge and I'm like, I want to be a strong mom. Like
Yeah.
I, for me, like the bounce back culture is obviously like super toxic. I don't care about like losing the baby weight. I care about like being strong for my kids. I care about just being healthy and how I feel. Like that to me is the most important thing over anything that would reflect like on a scale. So, and I know that inflammation builds up through the different things that we put our bodies through. So, I know I'm like, hey, talk about this one thing. And then I like spouted a
No,
thousand
it's
things
okay.
at you.
I had to take notes because it's a great complex question. But you know what's cool about the question you asked? Because normally when someone are talking, naming the issues by the end, my body has already intuitively reached an aligned answer of what the issue is. Because my brain can chew on it from all my past knowledge, but usually my intuition is more attuned now to just understand the clear, direct path. So when it comes to Ayurveda, we have a concept called the doshas, and the doshas are our individual mind body constitution made up from the elements of nature. So, Ayurveda's whole philosophy is we are made of nature, we are of nature. And if we just understand how much we are nature and nature is us, we'll shift how we behave and how we completely build a rhythm and circadian rhythm in our lives. And so, when you have the doshas, we have vata, which is more air and ether, we have pitta, which is more fire, water. We have kapha, which is more earth water. And so in your case, just looking at your features, I already know that you're predominantly Vata. And so as a predominantly Vata type of person, it would make sense that in your childhood you had joints that were having issues because that's air. That's how it is. It's a part of our movement. And Vata people have a tendency towards dryness, gut issues, gut disruption, digestive issues, bloating, gas. They have a tendency to have dryness in the joints as well. They have a tendency towards lack of oleation of those joints. So you're not going to have joint lubrication, which is what you're describing, because you're going to be lacking lubrication in general. And so a Vata person's homework is oleation. So your homework from an Ayurvedic practitioner would be ghee 3 times a day in your food.
Got it
on
in my
top.
cupboard.
Yeah. And so even I myself, when I realized I had leaky gut a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my God, that explains all my problems. I probably developed leaky gut in high school, just carried it on through kids. And I kept wondering, why don't I have an immune system? Why don't I have an immune system? In Ayurveda, we love ghee because it's medicated. It's a food that has such a medicinal purpose and effect. And so just ghee 3 times a day for a few weeks, don't like get heart disease from overdoing the fats and stuff, you'll see a difference of the whole system will just like take it on, absorb it, love it, and settle. And it's a very vata pacifying thing to do ghee like that. And then you talked about inflammation. When it comes to inflammation, I believe we all have some level of chronic low-grade persistent inflammation going on. Why? Because we have this crazy societal issue called the world around us is not really built for our body to live in peace, harmony, or health. Between the water, the air, the food, the EMFs, the Wi-Fi, the stress, the phthalates. I mean, you name it, there's something there that's going to irritate the body. And when it irritates the body like that, that's going to cause inflammation. And so this forest fire of inflammation is pretty much burning in almost all of us, wreaking havoc. And we aren't adding up our symptoms or understanding what the problem is. So we're not putting a fire extinguisher and just putting it out. And one of my mentors in my PhD, Dr. Agarwal, he was like, look, we turn on these light switches of inflammation in our 20s. We have stress, we're maybe pulling all-nighters, binge drinking, who knows what everyone's doing in college, not sleeping. But we switch on those light switches, and then when do we ever turn them off? We just go through our 30s, we start having kids and marriage and life and all these things, 40s, different stressors with our kids, 50s. And then by the time we hit 50s, we're like, oh my God, I'm going to the doctor. I really don't feel good. I have these 10 things. And the doctor's like, here's your diagnosis. Typically, those diagnoses are based on inflammation. Every itis, arthritis, gastritis, these are all inflammation based. And so if you look at Western medicine, everyone's like, take an NSAID, turn off your inflammation now acutely for the pain. And we're abusing NSAIDs and causing GI bleeds and all these issues. That's a part 1 issue, why I think turmeric for inflammation is key. And then secondarily, when it comes to gut health, we as a society aren't honoring gut health as the most important thing on earth that we do. So gut health is all of a sudden, of course, tied to inflammation. And because gut dysbiosis is common and gut is destroyed, all of a sudden we're an inflamed society who's having problems. And then the third thing that I wanted to mention was I find as moms, we all have a household with a kid with something serious going on. And I've noticed that trend pretty much across the board. I have not seen a house yet that doesn't have a kid that's got autism, allergies, ADHD, an autoimmune condition, and I always forget my 5th A. That's so common. Allergies, I think I said.
Eczema is huge. That's kind of like an allergy thing, I feel like.
Eczema is huge. Skin conditions. I see it everywhere and across the board. And so once I wrote The Conscious Pregnancy, a lot of moms were like, we know you're organic and crunchy, and I'm not, but my kid has this issue. What do you think? And I would always start with homeopathic medicine. Then I would jump to acupuncture, which most kids will not do, but chiropractor. Then it's like, okay, well, let's look at the supplements. Okay, let's look at, and there's not that much functional medicine pediatrics that I've seen, to be honest. So really you're talking about holistic pediatricians is typically who we're going to. But there's just not enough of a toolkit, probably because children are harder to study. We don't have as much science on it. And what I always laugh about is because I'm pushing for and investing in science on turmeric, people in my family will say, well, there's not enough science on that. I'm like, well, I'm not $1 billion pharma company. so I can't fund it the way they do. And I'm not gonna make a patented curcumin just to do that. It's not my ethos. I'm not gonna break a molecule off curcumin and call it better. So yeah, we don't have the same science, but that doesn't mean we don't have really good science. So sorry, that was a really long-winded way to say we're all turning into these mother warriors because we have to. And how can we just support each other? Because we're all researching and trying to figure it out together.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of those, when you're listing like the 5 things that moms are dealing with their kids, I think a lot of people might not even think that that's a problem though. Like it's just become normalized. Like it's common. It's very common. It's not normal, but it's common. And so people are like, oh yeah, like, my kid's allergic to these things. We have this, like almost all kids have eczema, like, so we're not viewing it as the body telling us that something underlying may be going on. So I think that, for people listening, that's like something to take into consideration. I feel like I had some of that knowledge going into it. So with my daughter's gut issues, I didn't realize it until she started like eating solids and her poops, because we were cloth diapering and they're like, oh, you just like flick the turd out. And I'm like, you can't, it's mushy. Like, what do you mean? And I didn't realize it until my second started solids. And I'm like, oh, she actually has solid turds. Like, I didn't know that this was how it was supposed to be. But we even got my oldest allergy tested and like nothing came back. They did like the prick thing on the back because then she got some eczema. So she was grown out of that, but she has some other issues. But yeah, it's so hard, like knowing where to go, how to advocate, because I did take some of those issues to our pediatrician who is more holistic, and she honestly brushed me off. And so I'm at a place right now where I have to look elsewhere for some stuff going on with her. But it sucks. It sucks that like we have to do that. That it feels like you have to fight to find answers.
Correct.
And also it's not accessible to everybody either, because when I worked with the functional medicine doctor, it was expensive. And like my husband and I are at points right now, like we both want to work with somebody and we need to get our daughter in. And that's so much out of pocket. Like none of them take insurance. And so we're like, okay, like who's going first? Like whose health are we prioritizing right now? Because like we can't we've spent already so much this year out of pocket. Because I'm like, I can't go to like a normal dentist. I have to go to this like functional dentist.
I
I'm like,
agree.
I have to like do all these things.
I want to go, and I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to drop that money, so I'm just going to avoid going. It's fully knowing I've got the fillings and I've got to fill them. But let's talk about what you're talking about for a moment. When it comes to gut health in children, I think it's like a full court press effort. My own children who are 10 and 13 will not listen to me, and they are not eating the food of the house. They want to eat like Chipotle and anything else they can get their hands on other than fresh, healthy, nutritious vegetarian Indian food that I make in this house for them. And so, as an Indian mom who's got to control the gut health, knowing that they don't understand how important it is, I actually open supplements into their food and mix their food into it because I'm sick of people not having the immune system that they should have. And so, when you're talking about little ones who have gut health issues, with kids, we have to start with non-invasive solutions. We have to start really low on that totem pole. So when we go to Western medicine, they're going to give us serious interventions because that's their toolkit. And thank you for having those serious interventions that we need at times. Where Ayurveda would start with your child is, I have a special homemade remedy I teach everyone on earth called Hing Gapani. So hing is a spice from India, super pungent. When we cook beans or lentils, we always take our oil, heat it, add cumin seeds, so they're like simmering in there, and we add a pinch of this spice called hing. Both spices have very specific intentions. They both are supportive in the digestion of those foods. Why? Because we need support if we're going to digest hard to digest foods. And so hing, my grandma had this very special remedy that's helped me a million times in my life. She would take a cup of water, boil it. Once you're boiling this water, you would add a pinch of hing and a pinch of a second spice called Kala Namak. So I'll spell them both for you so you can Google them and find them on Amazon. Hing is Hing. And if you type the more Western word for hing, it's asafoetida, ASAFOETIDA. I recommend everyone buys this spice on Amazon. It's very, 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 very useful. And there's a gluten-free version if you are gluten-free, because they process it oftentimes with gluten, which is so silly. And then Kala Namak is Kala. That means with the word black in Hindi. And then Namak, Namak, or it has an H after it sometimes. Namak, Namak, means salt. So you take a hing, which is a super pungent, stinky spice. Some of you will not even tolerate it. You'll think it's the weirdest thing on earth. My friends are always like, you should have warned me. You were bringing me a Ziploc of this stuff that would stink up my car for days. Like, I didn't know that the remedy was that stinky. I'm like, well, it worked, didn't it? And they're like, yes, it worked. And the kala namak is just a purple salt. It's very sulfuric. So you add a pinch of both. You might want to add a little more salt because it makes it yummier. Cool it to tea temperature, drink it. This one tea has solved so many people's problems. They didn't have to go get upper GI checks done. People who post-pandemic were having really horrible, weird gut symptoms that I couldn't understand. I gave
Yeah.
them this tea and it worked. And what's cool about it is it's great for children. It's a simple 2 spices out of the Indian spice cabinet. It's not a medicine. We didn't extract anything. So we know it's okay with kids. I use it on my kids. I use it on everyone's kids. And when they're babies, you can make hinka pani, you can make it a little more potent, put it on a cotton swab and rub it clockwise on the belly of the baby. So you're using it on the outside, but it's going to have the same effect of reducing gas, reducing colic, any of the GI upset a baby could be experiencing. So in Ayurveda, when we have someone off with gut, I always say just do a 1, 2, or 3 day gut reset. My father-in-law who lived with me, he would say, Shivani, my gut's upset. What do I do today? I was like, Dad, I'll just make you hinka pani, have it now, and then have it 2 more times today, 1 or 2 more times, and go on a khichdi protocol. Khichdi is a simple dish out of Ayurveda. I have a cookbook with it, so I'll give you the link to my cookbook. It's free for everybody, and it's on my website. But the cookbook has a recipe for khichdi. Khichdi is just lentils and rice with cumin and salt and ghee. Simple. It's like a porridge. And that one simple dish you can eat, we consider it a whole food because it's lentils with rice, it's complete protein. You can have khichdi for a day. You can have it for 2 days, 3 days. When I do detoxes, Ayurvedic detoxes with people, I have them take it for 7 days. Yeah, 7 days with maybe super broths in there. So it's a great way to just, give your gut a minute, reset, heal, get in there and do what it needs to do, clean house, but not as extreme as like a juice fast. You can't put a kid on a juice fast. You can't put yourself on a juice fast. My kids will not listen to me and do a khichdi plan. I'm not saying this is doable or easy. I'm just saying that these are options to kind of get in there and support what you're talking about. Because I wrote down probiotic ghee, khichdi, and hinka pani. They're easy. They're like the simplest way to go in there, do some good gut healing, reset, and then see, does the reset work? A lot of times the natural reset will work. It doesn't have to be horribly complicated. I can reset my gut just using those.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Because
I
you're
love
right, functional medicine gets expensive. I've been going to functional medicine since pandemic. In pandemic was like, you know what, I better get serious. And just because I self-treat doesn't mean I'm right. So I went and I got all this testing done. I have huge blood tests and stool tests and the Dutch test and 2 DNA tests on myself. I have like too much data. And it's great, but the same data they've given me, I've been to 2 now. I almost went to a third because I like to know who's best, and then that's who I recommend to my own clients. Um, you get the data, you still have to make the lifestyle change to hold any result you get. And
right.
that's where I find is the hard part is
Right.
the deficiencies I had, I still have them because I had to really make a huge diet change or a huge lifestyle change to shift those things. I shifted the easier ones. But Ayurveda is that lifestyle piece and that lifestyle knowledge that we have to apply if we want to maintain the results of any functional medicine diagnosis.
Right.
We teach the lifestyle. So,
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that that was like when I worked with one. So I did like the Dutch test, a stool test, all this stuff. And I had my hormones like were very out of whack. But he was like, it's not the problem that like you're overproducing estrogen. The problem is your liver can't rid it properly because my gut is so inflamed and like my liver was working overtime and I also had a parasite. So there was a lot going on. And it was like the first time in like a decade I wasn't bloated, like doing this. And but the thing is then like they're like, okay, take these supplements. And it's like, okay, but for how long? Am I on a bunch of different supplements for the rest of my life? Is that like what we're supposed to be doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
long? I like having like a clear cut, like, okay, like we're doing this and then we're checking back in, and then we're doing this and then we're checking back in, and then we
Right.
can cut these things back out and just make sure that we're like maintaining, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so that's why I like home remedies. I'm definitely a do it yourself. Like whenever anything arises, I'm like, okay, do it yourself, you know, anything.
Sure.
Like when it comes to like illness, I'm like, I will put anything on um DIY before like I do the next step. So um yeah, it's definitely, it can be hard going down that road too.
It
And
can
not
be.
knowing the end game, I guess.
Yeah, and you're right. The supplements do get expensive. And I feel the same way. I have two large trays in my kitchen full of supplements. And I'm a big believer in medical grade supplements because that's what I make. And I know the level of testing and commitment it takes to build a medical grade supplement that actually does the job. So now I have a very big distrust for like drugstore brands or even
Yeah.
health food store brands. Sometimes some of them are good though. And I have like probably $1,000 in vitamins on the trays, and I'm not taking them. And I'm like, Shivani, you have to take them. Like, you can't sit on them for months. This was a protocol you have to finish, but it's hard to remember to do them. And then the only way to come off, like, let's say B or D or any of these things is change your diet, change your lifestyle. So it's like, are you willing to do those things or are you pushing really hard in your life? I'm in a phase of my life right now. I'm pushing hard. I am working, I am traveling, I'm speaking at national medical conferences on science in front of surgeons. So, no, I'm not committed to living my health the way I want to. So, yes, I have to rely on the supplements. But anytime I have a season that's slower, like for me, I'm a pitta dosha. So I usually drop my summer down a couple notches. I don't go at full throttle. That's when I can be like, okay, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to eat more of the nuts and seeds I have to get what's in those supplements. Then I can make those healthy shifts. But I think we have to be so patient with ourselves, but constantly and consistently recommit to, okay, well, I don't want to take that vitamin forever. What are the three foods I have to like fit into my weekly rhythm so I don't have to take the vitamin?
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, I also love earlier when you were talking about like adding the spices to cooking like lentils and beans, because those
Yeah,
are foods that I've never really been able to tolerate. But that's also because the way that our society makes them isn't the way you're supposed to eat them. Like you're supposed to either soak them and sprout them or like add something to help digest it. So when people are like, you need to eat more legumes, you need to eat more beans, I'm like, they tear me up. Like even nuts, like unless they're soaked and you let
right.
them sprout, like I can't digest those things very well at all, and they always tear me up. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because like people give like so much advice, like you need to be eating these foods, but it's also like, okay, but that's not how they were originally intended to be consumed, and in
Right.
order for your body to really get the benefits and digest it, you need to do A, B, and C.
Correct. Yeah, I have YouTube channels. Like on my YouTube channel, I have videos on how to cook Indian cooking. And cooking is very intentional around these things because it's the biggest part of our diet. We eat lentils every day. We eat vegetables every day. And some of them are hard to digest vegetables like cauliflower and things like that. So the way we prepare them with our spices, we have chopped ginger in there. That's gastroprotective. It supports the digestive system. We use hing, we use cumin, we use cilantro, which has a cooling effect. We use turmeric, which is anti-inflammatory. Our garam masala added to turmeric is the black pepper that you need to absorb that. So these ancient wisdoms, I find, hold that knowledge that we all need to go find and reapply in the here and now. Because if you're just in the here and now, like it's easier for me to open a box of pasta and a bottle of sauce and cook it, and then I'm done with that task for my children in under 15 minutes. Versus Indian cooking, like sourcing all those foods. I shop at 5 different grocery stores in a given month because it's the Indian store, the health food store, the Costco, and the this. And then, well, not everyone has everything. So there's always a fifth store involved in there. And then there's Target Drive Up. So like
Yes.
it's like a whole system to get the house running on the food that needs. But when, again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, when no one is listening and I'm not winning at what I need to win, like right now, I can tell my son's gut is off. I ordered a stool test for him. I just have to make him give me the stool, which is its
Yeah.
own beautiful argument we're having right now. And while no one's listening, I just take really great medical grade probiotics and open it open half capsules per child. And I'm like, that's it. At least I know our guts are going to start healing on a daily basis, while I wish I could go test for the bigger serious issues. So I think we can play with doing both. It's like even walking in nature.
Mm.
Ayurveda teaches us align to your circadian rhythm, walk in nature. So I sometimes battle. I'm like, we will sit on a towel at the park and you don't even have to walk, but we're gonna go sit in the nature under the tree, under the sun. Um, so, so yeah, I think fitting it in is the key. And if you can even do over 50% at this point, I think that's good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'd love to touch on just kind of like the season of life, because a lot of the listeners are either trying to conceive or they're pregnant or they have young kids. And you had mentioned like in Ayurveda that you take like 2 years to like prepare like for fertility.
Yeah.
But for people listening, is there like a couple of quick or easy tips to like maybe reduce stress on our body or reduce inflammation or like for me, the circadian rhythm thing is like my sleep is so off right now, like so it's like how
Rightfully
do
so.
I actually don't feel unrested,
Okay.
but I think I'm also used to it because it's my oldest is 3.5 and my youngest is 3 months and there's three in there. So I haven't been out of it yet. So I'm like just
Right.
used to like, you just go because you have to, like, I have to wake up and make my kids breakfast. So,
Right.
I don't feel like super tired. But I know that not sleeping great puts stress on my body.
Sure.
So, like, are there any like quick easy things of like where to start in like this season of life?
Sure. So Ayurveda has a lot of knowledge and wisdom on fertility because we consider the moment of conception a pretty weighted moment. The moment of conception decides the dosha and nature of the child for the child's entire lifetime. And so the decision to even make a child is such a spiritual and conscious choice. Not always, sometimes we conceive by accident, but let's say it's a conscious choice. I knew by 30 I would conceive my first child. It was a decision I had made. So around 27, 28, I started thinking, all right, I need to be healthy for that. What does that mean? I probably should take some vitamins. I probably should do some things. So I actually went to India and did something called Panchakarma, which is this huge detox. We believe in annual detoxes in Ayurveda. Now, here in the West, we don't. We don't typically take 3 weeks and then let someone do colonics and enemas and massages and all the crazy detoxing tools they had there. But to the extent possible, the minute you decide you are going to get pregnant, go somewhere and detox. Like, do a good one where you're detoxing as much as you humanly can because we have such accumulation of toxins, and that's interference, that's immune issues, that's gut issues, that's inflammation wreaking havoc. And so the sooner we can just settle all those things down and get them out of the way, then the body can build itself to be healthy and whole. Then, secondly, looking at your fertility as this journey where you're just trying to achieve your most vibrant health and show up vibrant and healthy at that moment when you're ready to start conceiving. I have a lot of women who have reached out to me who are on their sixth round of IVF. This girl who just did that, she just got pregnant. So she's keeping me in the loop on her pregnancy because through functional medicine and reducing inflammation with Ayurveda, we got her on the right track and fixed up. I have someone else very close to me right now going through the IVF journey as well. So I had her in her city go to an Ayurvedic doctor and do a proper Ayurvedic detox. And then she actually just conceived without having to do her first round of IVF. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to either partner with IVF and those solutions that we're going to do, or just set up the body to be so healthy. My sister makes fun of me. She's like, "You're so fertile. It's ridiculous." I'm like, I just actually live the Ayurvedic lifestyle. I don't want to be fertile anymore. I just want to like I have my two kids. I feel very complete. And so those things that we want to do, which is invest in our health, come down to circadian rhythm. That's aligning to your circadian rhythm. It's as easy as wake up in the morning and make sure you kiss the sun, that the sunlight reaches you and your body. 5, 10 minutes, easy. Have your morning coffee outside, not inside, that kind of thing. Or it's as easy as sleeping on time at night. So many of us push and push ourselves and don't sleep anywhere near the right bedtime. And according to Ayurveda, sleeping as close to 10 o'clock is your best investment in being as close to your own natural melatonin release, helps you detox and rejuvenate at night. So I teach that sleeping 10 to 2 on the clock is the most important time. And then, of course, get your other 3 to 4 hours of sleep the best you can. But the more we can sleep within that window, the better. And so
Mhm.
even now as an entrepreneur, I'm always sleeping closer to 11. And honestly, half the problem is my children don't want to sleep anytime before 11. And so I'm pushing everyone back towards like 9 o'clock in bed with a book. We should be sleeping by 10 here. But my whole house runs late because my husband shows up so late from work. And I get it. But yeah, I'm trying to always fix our sleep and those kinds of things. And then another good one is just honoring gut health. We teach a lot about gut health in Ayurveda. I teach about when to eat, what to eat, how to hydrate, when to hydrate, oleation of the gut lining, different tips for leaky gut, nutrient density, nutrient variety. It gets to be a lot, but in the end, you can intuitively start to practice what feels good to your gut and what doesn't, what foods you tolerate and what you don't. Most of us need to give up gluten. We don't want to, but most of us are finding ourselves pretty intolerant to it at some phase between pregnancy and our kids. Why? Because of the level of Roundup, the level of glyphosate and those things. So just doing a gluten detox for 2 weeks will illuminate to you if you're one of those people. And that's an easy way to reduce inflammation and heal the gut. It's just take out the things that are damaging the gut lining. So honor sleep, circadian rhythm, honor your gut. Um, know your dosha is another big one. We barely covered doshas, but I have a dosha quiz on my website that people can download easily. You can understand from your dosha very quickly how to change your behavior to support your health in an entirely different way. Like I'm a pitta, and I understand now why I get headaches. It's because I'm dehydrated all the time and I need to eat more cooling foods because I'm so intense in my day teaching and working. If I don't cool down myself, I'm not supporting myself in my pitta fire. And so doshas is a really cool thing. I have YouTube videos on that. And then the gut healing recipes are really powerful too. So I have a cookbook that's free on my website. Everyone can download it and start using those Ayurvedic recipes and understanding how to play with the Ayurvedic super spices, which have very healing properties. And spices are inexpensive. We can cook with them every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. One thing I did love to make was golden milk.
Yeah.
So I would make that and I'd put a ton of turmeric in there and ginger to where it was like orange. My golden milk would be orange.
Yeah.
I made a huge batch for postpartum because I just really wanted to work on warming foods and like it was a lot of like brothy soups and just warm drinks and teas and but my baby doesn't tolerate dairy very well, so it's still in my freezer. I made it in advance and froze it because we get milk from like a farm here. Um, so it's like still in there. I was actually just looking at it the other day. I'm like, oh, I'd love like some golden milk, but I gotta work on some other stuff. Maybe I'll rub some of that stuff you were saying around his belly. The
Yeah.
what was
You
it? The
can make it
heme?
again. Make it again with coconut milk.
Yeah, I know. Coconut milk actually tears me up.
Oh,
So
okay.
I know coconut milk
Almond
doesn't do good
milk.
with me. Yeah, I could probably do almond milk. Um, but yeah, so it's yeah. But I love things that have like the spice. So I'm definitely going to look into your cookbook. Before we wrap up, I'll include the links to that in the show notes. And then where can people find and follow you and learn more about everything that you're doing and teaching and your supplements and all of that?
Sure. So my website is shivanigupta.com. It's SHIVANIGUPTA.com. And I'm at dr.shivanigupta on Instagram. So all those links are there. And then my supplement company is Fusionary Formulas, FUSIONARY Formulas, and at Fusionary Formulas RX. And we made a special code for your audience, which is JOY, JOY, will give them 15% off.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much for coming on and just sharing all the work that you're doing. I'm definitely gonna deep dive a little bit more into this because I haven't looked that much into Ayurvedic stuff. And I'm definitely into like always checking out new ways of doing things. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.